It's the Sick Show. It's the Sick Show.
It's the Sick Show.
Hey, welcome everybody. Hey, do me a favor, just kind of sit back for a minute and think about the people who are in your lives that have, just an extraordinary life. And sometimes that extraordinary life is not necessarily an in-your-face, super califragilistic, expialidocious type thing. But my cousin, Angie Wyatt, she has had an extraordinary life, and I'm going to let her tell the story, folks. So, you want to talk adoption?
We can do that.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Okay.
It's interesting. How
Sure.
deep into it you want to go?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
I'll answer whatever.
I like it.
Yeah.
So one of the big things I've tried to do is just create a podcast that highlights ordinary people who have extraordinary lives. You know what I mean? And ordinary people have extraordinary lives. Like Fred Hoffman seems like an ordinary guy.
Right.
The dude's had an extraordinary life.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Steve Hurd seems like an ordinary guy, but he's had an extraordinary life. I mean, all our life experiences play into something really special.
You never know everybody's story.
No, you don't. And it's really interesting. And so that's why you're here, so I can talk to my first best friend. I love how Jason coined that term. That's now become my favorite thing to say when
Yes.
I talk about you and Jason's.
Yes.
My first best friends. So that's what we're gonna do today. And I'll introduce it all later. I'll go back through and edit it and
Perfect.
I would go, hey, welcome everybody to but now I'm like, all right, I'll find a great spot for me to break in. I'll introduce you, and then it just flows right into it.
Sure.
The one that came out yesterday with Erica Wyckoff, thought it was interesting because it starts out with her going, am I on? And she was like via Google Meet, and I'm like, hey, there you are. It looks like you're shaking your head. And like we're literally right at the beginning of it.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And but I got to introduce her as who she is, and all her accolades without her being on the thing and,
Right.
feeling like, oh, that's weird. So, man, we've known each other a long time.
Very long time.
And I was sitting here, I was thinking earlier today, when's the last time we just sit down and talked?
God, forever.
It's been a long.
It's always been, in passing,
Right.
I'll see you out on the trail or something like that. And We'll
Yep.
talk for about 15, 20 minutes, but, unless we're at coffee on Saturdays. But even at that, you're just too busy wrapped up, listening
is.
to everybody else's conversation.
So that's funny because I haven't even talked about coffee on my podcast.
Oh, now that's a history right there.
I know it is, and I want to get your mom and dad in here to talk about a lot of family stuff and everything else. And I planned on getting them in about a month ago, and Mom and Aunt Susie goes in the hospital, and I'm like, son of a
And then
gun!
2 weeks later, Dad had, a procedure done.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my
So, yeah.
gosh, man!
They were both out of commission for, a couple months, so I had to run them to appointments and things like that. But they are getting better. Dad's all better, and Mom's getting on the mend, so
All right,
we're doing good.
I'm gonna get them in here. I'm gonna find a way to get them in here. That's
They
for
would
sure.
love it.
I gotta turn you up a little bit. It's funny how I had different people come in, and the mic point hits differently with every person that sits there. And I've wanted to get Jennifer up here to have a podcast with her. Hasn't happened yet. Hasn't happened. I've had her up here once. I've got her on recording a couple times. One for the intro. Had her and the girls up here to do the intro. But she said something the other day. She goes, "When am I going to be on your podcast? Whenever you're ready.
Never, yeah.
You live here. Let's just go do it."
Yeah.
Let me think about it.
She's probably afraid of what you're going to ask her.
God, man. So we came into each other's lives through extraordinary measures.
Yes.
I think they're extraordinary. I think they're incredible measures. I mean,
Yes.
what a gift.
Oh my
right?
gosh. I have been extremely blessed, because there's other people that have different stories than what I've got.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not have asked for a better family than what I've got.
Oh, it's making me tear up just
Yeah.
thinking about it. Like
Yeah.
we have collectively just such an amazing group of people that are our support system and have been there for us in multiple ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about just the blessings of having all those people as a source of knowledge, experience, judgment
Mm-hmm.
to draw from. And, some people are like, well, I'm not judgmental. We're all judgmental.
Oh yeah.
And we need that.
Mm-hmm.
We need someone to provide us with a little bit of shame and guilt at times.
Kind of like that accountability.
Oh, man, 100%. And
Kind of keep you flying right.
our family is no different than anyone else's. And when it comes to holding each other accountable in that way,
If somebody tells you they have a perfect family,
oh,
they're
Lord,
lying.
come on, man.
They are lying.
Come on, man. So you were, and I'm just going to tell my listeners. So I'm with Angie Wyatt. Angie was adopted and became me and Jason Jones's new first best friend as a group. And thanks, Jason, for coining that for us. There was something on Facebook. I found a picture of us together or something.
I know I posted one of us at Christmas time when your mom used to always take us out to the 4-H building to see Santa.
Yeah. Oh my
And
gosh.
that one, yes.
Man.
So that's like one of my favorites.
God, the 70s.
I think it would have been the one we were down at Aunt Carol's.
Okay.
I think that was the last one that got posted of all of us.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Love it. And I've been sending you some pictures every now and then as I go
Yes.
through and find them. And
Yes.
just the memories start flooding back and thinking about hanging out at your guys' house during the different holidays and going trick or treating with you guys, hanging out at your house. I remember one time we snuck out and went down to the Malots.
Oh, yeah?
And I thought we were sneaking out, but your parents were there. For God's sakes, we weren't sneaking out. If your parents are at the place you're sneaking out to. But then it was awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, getting sent down the stairway in a stinking what are they? The sleeping bags.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Friday nights, it's funny because, mom and dad had about 8 couples that they ran around with. So back then, you couldn't afford babysitters.
That's right.
So we went to each other's houses and all of us kids, there was probably about 6 or 8 of us. And then of course, if you guys stayed all night, then that's more kids or whatever. And we would terrorize the house. It's a wonder the house even could still stand. But I remember our house would put a twin mattress in the stairwell and put beanbags at the bottom of it. And then of course you got to slide down and we had to make obstacle courses, whoever could get through them faster. And it's just crazy stuff and just the things we'd come up with to entertain ourselves. Oh yeah. Yeah, the good times, the good stuff. We didn't have the video games.
Oh no! Until we ended up with the handhelds. I remember the handhelds. We'd go to Christmas, and I was terrible at them. Your brother Mark was so good. Like he was.
Oh yeah.
Jason, I think he was really good too. And I'm like, I have no idea. I'll never survive.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk to you today about adoption and how. What's interesting is, I almost led into that with how that changed your life, but you have no idea how it changed your life because you were so young. I'm sure you can reflect a little bit and.
Honestly, I don't remember ever not being adopted. I don't even know when we can go. I think you shared on one of your podcasts, like one of your first memories or something like that. I don't remember a lot from when I was little. I remember the things that I was told that happened.
Sure.
But I don't remember a time with my biological mother.
When did you learn you were adopted?
I've always grown up knowing I was
You
adopted
knew it from
the very beginning.
That's so interesting. I think there's, as a parent, I always wondered, and we considered adoption multiple times. Heck, there's still times when we consider adoption, and I always wondered, would we put it out front from the get, and or would we wait until And I think that's an individual thing.
It is
Obviously.
because you don't know. I guess you don't know what background that child's going to be coming from. And right now, when I was, being adopted, they didn't have this open adoption.
Interesting that you bring that up because I just looked at a statistic. 95% of adoptions now are open adoptions.
And I could see where, that might be beneficial, but then I can also see where it would have, it could have a negative impact as well, depending on the background. Like for me, like I said, I've always known, I think it might have been beneficial to know a little more history because it's funny because I think I really started becoming curious about my background about maybe 10, 11, around in that age, closer to 13. And I would get little snippets of information, and that was enough to pacify me.
Sure.
And then it's like, okay, no big deal. And then I would go a few more years, and it's like, okay, I want a little more information. I think probably one of the bigger things is I had a health condition that had come up that I was going to have to get some testing on. And so that's when my mom had petitioned to see if she could get at least the health records.
Okay.
And come to, so then that way we knew what we were dealing with it. But even back then, of course I'm showing my age, being 50 now, that there wasn't a lot of information to be given at that time. You have, old doctor's records, ones that probably didn't keep very good records at that time. And so I think I was 13 and got that information.
How old were you when you were adopted?
I was 2.
Okay.
And I guess at that age, because actually my mom and dad actually had another little girl that they were supposed to adopt. And that fell through because apparently, from what I remember being told, that mother was very tight knit with the lawyer that was doing the case.
Okay.
So at that time, she would have known where the little girl was going.
Yeah.
And like I said, back then they didn't have the open adoption.
Yeah.
So when that came to light, it kind of put a hold to it. So that fell through. So lucky for me, it fell through.
Yeah, absolutely.
That mom and dad said they just went to get me from the foster home, which was in Huntington, which is kind of odd to me that it was not that far away from here.
Right.
That it was that close, and brought me home for the weekend. And then they called and said, "We're keeping her. We're not bringing her back." I'm like, okay. So
I'm hearing Uncle Fred say that.
oh yes, yes. And so the rest of that, as far as with family, that part's history. Yeah. And like I said, I can't express how blessed I've been, because and it really made me appreciate our family so much more when I had gotten older. And the courts and stuff, they're not very forthcoming with information. And I remember being in a car, and mom and dad and I were going up north somewhere. And at that time, I didn't know that mom and dad had taken the day and went to Huntington to try to find more information for me. They told me they were going to look for, get estimates on getting a new roof.
Right.
So and then they started talking about somebody else, and her name was Flossie. And of course, being a young kid, I'm, ranting and raving, what kind of name is Flossie? Who would name their kid that? It's like, right. Oh my gosh. Well, then they kind of were looking at each other. Well, then come find out years later, that was my biological mother's name, but they were talking about somebody else. Wow. And that's why I was some little thank God they didn't name me Flossie Jr. but then, Dad and I remember I was, let's see. I think I was out of high school at that time, and I had told Dad I think I was ready to go further in looking.
So you waited.
I did.
Yeah.
Because I had her name.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, but I don't know if I was scared, but I remember growing up and, the constant wondering, you look at people, I wonder if I'm related to them. Oh, I wonder how I'm connected to them. Just that, not really an emptiness, because like I said, I have a wonderful family, right. But it's just, there's something missing. You just can't put the puzzle all the way together. Mm-hmm. You just have like one more piece that needs to go in. And so then when I had graduated, and I think I was in college at that time, because I was still living at mom and dad's. And so we decided, I took a day off work and we went to Huntington, since that's where I was come from. And I had her name.
Did you have her full name?
I had her full name. Well, so we went to Huntington, went to the library, and because I kind of had a time frame of when she was in school. So I found her picture in a yearbook.
Okay.
And then the librarian there was extremely helpful, because she even said, well, if you wanted to write a letter, and if she was to ever come here, we do have a box that we keep that stuff in. Well, I didn't do that, but she did tell me, she says, if she was ever married, marriage licenses are public records. So we're like, okay. So
Okay.
we left there and we went to the courthouse in Huntington. Well, come to find out she had been married.
And this is with your mom and dad. Okay.
Because they have been
Yeah.
amazing through this whole thing.
No doubt in my mind.
It's just been, whatever you want to do, we will support you. We will, whatever you want, we're there for you. So Dad and I went to Huntington. Like I said, I did that. We went to the courthouse. She had been married. Well, back then, all that information is right there, handwritten.
Right.
So I'm trying not to get myself in trouble here. So they didn't have, it was very easy. You could have probably stole somebody's identity at that time, put it that way.
Yeah.
So with the job I had at that time, I could take that information and I plugged it in. And if she was still living in the state of Indiana, I could have found where she was.
Yeah.
And then come to find out, she wasn't in the state of Indiana, but the guy she married was in Indiana.
Okay.
So my dad goes to Bluffton, to where he lives, and starts, at that time, he sold insurance. And of course, at that time, had to wear a suit jacket and, be all presentable. So he goes up to the courthouse, to the clerk's office, and is asking a bunch of questions. And so the clerk in there asked my dad if he was from America's Most Wanted. And my dad's like, what? Yeah, like a whole twist. Yeah, and I'm like, and so Dad asked, he said,
I didn't see that.
oh, yeah, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So Dad's like, well, is this the type of person you would think that would be on that show? And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like,
Oh, wow.
and I'm like, okay, well, we are not pursuing that. We're not going down that route. But then come to find out, I had actually been adopted twice. So, yeah. So my biological mother had gotten married, and I actually, when she gave birth to me, I had her maiden name.
Okay.
So then when she got married, he then adopted me. So then I took his name. So on my adoption records I have with Mom and Dad, they have, both names on there. So that's why I didn't pursue that one.
Mm-hmm.
So then, also while we was at the Huntington Library, since I knew what her maiden name was, which her last name was Rainwater, isn't a very common name.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a copy of the phone book of the Rainwaters. So then I just kind of let that alone for a while. And
Right.
probably a few months it went down the road. And at that time, they had the big bag cell phones and all this stuff. So when I decided I was ready, my dad made the phone call from his bag phone. So then that way, if she did not want to have contact with me, she didn't have my number either.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So first call right off the bat, it was her brother. And
Wow.
he's in Markle. I don't know if he's still Markle, because this had been probably about 25, 30 years ago.
Okay.
When I found that out. And then, so then we made contact, talked on the phone. And then a few months later, Mom and Dad and Bethany and I, we packed up and we head to Alabama, because that's where she was at. So I got to meet her, and it was different. I have a half sister and a half brother.
Okay.
And here's a funny little story. So going down through Alabama, Mom always jokingly said, we're going so far down in the hills, they have to pump the sunlight in.
That's good.
So we're going down, all these winding, curvy roads and all this stuff. And, us not knowing and being familiar, we're being cautious.
Right.
Well, there's this little souped up car goes zinging right around us. And of course, Dad had a few choice words to say about that. So we're sitting here at my biological mother's house. Well, sure and behold, that same car comes pulling up. It was my half brother.
Oh my God.
Oh, it was hilarious. It was so funny. And so Dad, of course, didn't say anything because didn't want to get him in trouble.
Right.
But it was different because back then I was more into, wanting that family connection.
Sure.
But here I had just been, boom, dropped right into their family. And so my half brother and my half sister, I don't think they were quite ready for that at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Were they aware?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they knew. I think they found out later on. And I kind of found some more information out because my sister, her name is Dawn. So we talk, quite often. Um, Now my half brother and I, we don't really talk a whole lot, but it's weird because talking to her, I find out more um, than what I did when I would talk with my biological mother.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because I would try to write letters and stuff at that time, I wouldn't really get much of a response. So I just kind of stopped. Well, then my half brother had reached out and said, hey, we're family. We need to get together. We need to have that connection. And I don't know if maybe them having their families, that family connection started to be a little more important to them.
Mm-hmm.
So Glenn and I had went back down to Alabama. I didn't realize how long it had been since I had been down there. And when I went down there, my biological mom, she says, it's been 18 years since you've been back here. And I'm like, wow, didn't realize it had been that long. And then she just recently passed away, just a little over a year ago.
Okay.
So I get that call. Actually, I was down in Bloomington, got that call. We come rushing back, and then drop Glenn off, and then I'm headed to Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of strange. It's one of those things where you just feel like, I've got time. I've got time where I can work on that relationship later. And so listening to, Dawn sharing her stories of, growing up and DJ of things that happened, it was neat to hear. But, and I was there trying to console them, but I'm kind of, internalizing my own battle
Sure.
of, yeah, I probably should have got down here more. Because they struggled. And I know she always felt like I was upset with her for giving me away. And I told her, I said, I am not upset with you. I love you because you were brave enough to make the choice to know that you could not provide for me a good life and that you loved me enough to let me have a better life someplace else.
Takes a
And
lot of courage.
yeah,
Takes a lot of courage.
yeah. And I'm so thankful she did because she then had my sister and then she had my brother and they really struggled.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that she couldn't bear to go through giving up another child.
Hmm.
And for them, I wish that she would have. Because my sister really struggles. And I hate that for her. Because I almost, not that I feel guilty, because I have been blessed. I
Right.
like I said, I have been blessed beyond measures. And to know what she had to go through growing up, I would have been in that situation.
Right.
And I hate that for them, but I can't change that.
Sure.
And so that I kind of struggle with that.
Yeah.
But I did also get to, it's probably maybe 10 years ago or so in conversations with her, she gave me my biological father's name. And at that time, I never did anything with that. Well, then it's probably about 4 years ago, wonderful Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, being in insurance, I always call it the nib nose page. I'm being PG here.
Uh-huh.
Beacon.
Yeah.
Oh, you
Oh,
can
man.
find out all kinds of stuff on Beacon. So I knowing that they're in Huntington, so I put in their name. Okay, well, there's two people by that name, so it's like, okay, which house am I going to go show up on the doorstep saying,
That's
guess
right.
who I am? But I did not do that. I had that information for probably about 5 years before I actually did anything with it. I wish I would have done something sooner because I have a great relationship with my half brother in Huntington. We get together quite often.
So you have another.
I have two other half brothers in Huntington.
Oh, so interesting.
Yeah. Now, the one he's not on Facebook, so we kind of get together at different family outings. That if Lenny will put them together, then we all show up there.
Mm-hmm.
So Lenny and Nancy, I get together with them. That's my half brother. I think maybe we have a stronger connection because we're closer in age. Nathan would be my other brother. He's I want to say, and I'm just kind of going off my cuff here. I think he might be 11 years younger than Lenny. So there's a big difference there. But funny how that kind of came about. I got on Facebook and I saw the name Lenny Zeller. And I thought I would look at it, and then a day would go by. I go back on Facebook, and I'm Facebook stalking, looking at pictures and all this stuff. And then I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. Well, then I finally, it's probably 9:30, Glenn had already went to bed, and all right, I'm doing it. So I type out this message, and I'm like, hey, is your dad Leonard Zeller that would have graduated in Huntington about this time? And he said, yeah. I said, well, he says, why? And I said, I think we might be related. And it just kind of left it at that.
Okay.
And he's like, okay, well, how would we be related? I'm like, oh, crap. How do I, because I'm thinking, if he has no idea, how do I dive into that?
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, well, I said, here's the interesting part. I said, this is where it gets difficult. And so I just laid it all out there. Hey, my biological mother gave me, this name, saying that, he was my biological father, and about this time, and just kind of laid it all out. Well, he says, let me do some checking. He says, it's funny you say that because I remember a conversation when I was younger, or that he was saying that when he was younger, that they were talking about another one, talking about me.
Another kid, yeah.
And they could just kind of played it off. So he said, I couldn't remember if I had actually heard it or if I had dreamt it. And so then when he talked to his father,
These are the moments when I wish there was video, just so I could.
it's like, yeah, the
My
looks on
shock
your face
face.
are priceless.
Oh,
It's great.
God, I can't.
Yeah. So yeah, and the tangled webs we
Half
have.
the time I'm trying not to cry. Half the other times my eyes are trying to stay in my head.
It's kind of like the cartoon where it goes, wooga.
So good.
So he asked him, and he's like, no, he says, it's not me. He says, I think it's this other guy that she was dating. And because they had just broken up and they had only went out that one time. Well, so this is the lesson. One time is all it takes. So,
My mom would always say that she had sex 4 times.
of course, some of them were maybe under the rock. So, of course, he said it wasn't him, but Lenny had then come back. He says, I'm not 100% sure of that. So we did a DNA test. And and he had told his father that, that's what we were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did and got the results. It's like 6 weeks later. And he took him to him. He says, sorry, she's yours.
Wow.
And then Lenny and I had gotten together a few times before I actually met Leonard.
Okay.
And like I said, there's so many things I could probably tell, but I'll hold some of those back. So I met Leonard, and I guess there was actually a court proceeding done when I was 2, because apparently there was the issue of paternity then,
Mm-hmm.
but back then they didn't have all the technology. They just went on blood type. And I found this out after, talking to Leonard. And I guess there was supposed to be another court hearing. Well, she just up and took off with me and went to Bluffton. And then that's where she met this other gentleman and married him. And so he just assumed that I wasn't his.
Sure.
And that's why she took off, and that it was getting a little too close, that, maybe things were going to start unraveling for her.
Mm-hmm.
And so meeting him and his wife, which they are absolutely wonderful, and having dinner with them, they even said, had we known, we would have taken you. And of course, I'm like, I said, I love that. That makes me feel good, but I couldn't ask for better than where I'm at. Like I said, I can't express how blessed I am. And I wish everybody that has been in the system, because not everybody has the same happy ending that I do.
Right.
And I am beyond blessed and thankful for that.
Wow. there's just so many
Oh yeah.
mind-blowing moments happening right
Yeah.
here.
And it's so funny because, you know, I remember one time at coffee that we were all sitting around, and this is a funny moment. Um, you know, everybody gets those moments when your parents start talking about things that you just kind of go, "Ugh, I don't want to hear that." so, 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 of course, those conversations
Not
come.
me. My parents only had sex 4 times, so
Exactly. So, you know, and I always, with my mom and dad, I'd always plug my ears and go, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to hear this, you know, and, so Aunt Carol, she just kind of looked at me. She's like, well, how do you think you got here? And I just looked at her and I'm like, I was adopted, so I don't have to think about that.
so good.
And she just kind of looked at me because, you know, with me always being, you know, in the family,
Right.
you just don't think about it.
Absolutely.
And I can remember my mom, this was after I had had Bethany. I think she was maybe 11 or 12. And her biological dad was adopted by his stepfather. And they didn't have the best of relationships. And so he did not have good things to say about being adopted.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess Bethany had come home and was saying things to my mom about, you know, being adopted, how it was awful and all of this stuff. And then mom later asked me, she says, have you ever told her that you were adopted? And I'm just sitting here like, no, I hadn't. I said, it's just not something I think about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is my family. I
Right.
don't think about that until a funny situation like that comes up where I could just say,
Right.
and
Oh yeah.
I used to use towards my brother all the time because he would, being a brother, and you're
Oh
fighting and stuff
yeah.
like that. He'd always say, well, they just, had to take, or what was it? He said, oh, they loved him more and all this stuff. And I, so, because he was theirs. And I'm like, well, they had to take you. They chose me.
My mom said that to me once.
Are you serious?
She said, I chose your dad. I can make another one of you. She edified my dad to a next level, and she loved my dad, and she loved us kids too.
Of course.
But I'm telling you, in that moment, she meant it.
Oh, shoot.
There was no doubt in my mind where I stood
Yeah.
as her kid,
Yes.
that her husband was the man
Yes.
of the house. He was the leader of our pack.
Yes.
And you better believe
Yes.
we'll make another one of you.
And you know what? It's funny because so many family dynamics, they don't have that anymore.
Right. Oh, man. Angie.
It's, yeah.
I watched it
Mm-hmm.
for 9 years. I've been in the middle of it. And one part about it being an educator that I miss and that I loathe
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. I loved and loathed it at the same time was the kids coming in who are just learning
Mm-hmm.
of their family background by the time they're 13
Oh,
or
yeah.
something, and or whatever the situation may be, the home
It's
situation.
so different. How many
Very difficult.
grandparents are raising
Oh,
grandkids, and
I sit
it's
down
just,
with Don Hoover. Remember the Hoovers, Jerry Hoover, Don
oh
Hoover,
yeah,
and,
yeah.
that moved in, and Don and I sit down for I don't know hours as I was going through my master's program, and I put together he helped me, assisted me with putting together a study proposal to look at adoptive parents, grandparents as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent a lot of time
Yeah.
going over this. We had some anecdotal data, we had some actual data, and compiled all this stuff together to make a proposal to do an actual study, to write a paper about it, to do an academic paper proposal. I turned this paper in, and the professor at Ball State responded with, interesting, but not study worthy.
What?
And I thought, boy, you just don't live in the
Wow.
real world. And it made me think, just talking about that grandparents raising their kids, it made me think about my own background and the people I ran around with. And one of my best friends was Shane Williamson,
Mm-hmm.
raised by his grandparents. I didn't
Yeah.
think about it as a kid. Our
Yeah.
kids don't think about it.
Yeah.
My own daughters, both of their best friends were being raised by grandparents
Mm-hmm.
when they were in school. And I didn't really connect any of that. It's just really interesting the family dynamic changes that have happened, and some of that, and not my kids' best friends, but some of that is the recent opium epidemic, and various other things. But boy, that's a whole nother podcast. I'd love to
Well,
sit
and
down
and just like that situation, you like we talked about, being adopted, people were adopted into families that they may have been forced into that situation. It wasn't their choice.
Yeah.
So then the child then suffers because, you know, they weren't as welcoming.
I had a wake up call a few years ago. Well, it's more than a few years ago. It's been 10, 12 years ago. But thinking about kids that are in situations out of their own control, I mean, all kids really are in situations out of their own control.
Right.
Every kid is. The Youth Opportunity Center over in Muncie, and just this idea. I was in a round table, and there were some people talking about, and it was a mixed group. It was a mixed group of student teachers, experienced teachers, older teachers. So it was a very mixed group at a school I was working at, and one of the ladies that was there, she had formerly been the principal at the Youth Opportunity Center, and Shelley had made a comment. Those kids, most of those kids, it wasn't their choice that got them there.
Exactly.
And boy, what a wake up call that is.
Yeah.
To realize how kids are thrown into just how out of control a situation is for a child,
Exactly.
whether it's good or bad.
Yep. And that's I remember, I think it was Leslie Love's class. She used to do child development, and she would have all different. Because I remember it was me and a couple other students. I don't know if they want their stuff shared, so I'm not going to mention their names. That we would talk to a class, and it was about being adopted and stuff like that. And I think, because she was very good about precautions and things like that, with health class and stuff like that. And I'm like, there are so many parents that want kids that can't have them. That I know it is a difficult choice. I don't know if I would be able to make that choice to say, I want my child to have a better life that I know that I can't provide for. It takes a very, very strong woman, couple, because the woman may find herself in a position where she is all alone, or it may be, a team effort. The boy and the girl make the choice together. That we're too young. We've got things that we've got school and all of that. I'm not a judgment person on that.
I can't imagine being placed. I can't imagine being the person.
I used to, and
being,
yeah, and I used to have a very strong opinion about abortion. Just for the simple fact that could have been me, and I may not be here.
Sure.
I don't have quite the strong opinion that I used to. I think that maybe come with age because everybody's situation is different. I'm not living in their shoes.
Absolutely.
I don't know what kind of health risk, it could put them in. It's not my place to judge that. Everybody has to make their own choice in that matter. But just to know that there is somebody out there that would love that child.
100%.
If they should decide to go that route. I have friends that have had fertility issues and have adopted, and then later have had children of their own. I think women sometimes put so much stress on their body that makes it difficult for them to conceive. So there's always options.
I think there's cultural things that come along with that too.
Yeah.
I've thought a lot about in the past 15 years or so about things I didn't think about when I was much younger, and that's one of them. Just the cultural pressures that come along with being a man in our country, in America, and in the world in general, but specifically in America because that's where we're at, and the cultural pressures that come along with being a woman and the expectations of both, and even for those that are that are unsure
Mm-hmm.
of where they stand on gender lines. And
Oh yeah.
once again, another thing that it's not my job.
Nope.
It's not my job.
No.
There's
There's a higher person that does that judgment.
absolutely,
Mhm.
and so uh, I'm telling you, uh, I'm still having an emotional issue here, just thinking about how much different my life would be without you.
Well, I have to say, I was thinking about this last night, and I still tell mom and dad, going to your house was probably one of the highlights of my childhood. It was my most favorite place to go.
You were talking about basically hunting down, or to me it's skip tracing because that's what I did for 10 years as a collector. But by the way, my daughters don't give me any information about the boys they date
Oh,
because
you
they
can find.
know any little tidbit.
Uh-huh.
I have number one the background, and I did it before we had social media going
Oh, yeah.
crazy
Yeah.
and the internet available to me to search anything and
Oh,
everything.
yes.
So they don't give me any information about the people they're dating. And then once that does come about, I do my job as a dad,
Of course.
and
You have to.
I'm aware.
Yes.
But anyhow, but you were talking earlier about finding your biological dad and his family, and utilizing Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, oh my God, if my mom was alive for Facebook,
Oh, my.
oh God, Angie, like my mom was a vault of
Oh,
information.
my. If there was something you wanted or you needed and you weren't in a big hurry for it, she would find it.
No matter what it was.
Yes. Anything.
It could have been a coin.
Yes.
It could have been a pin from somebody, from a business that closed in the 50s.
Yes.
Ooh, give me a couple days.
Yes.
Let me see what I can
I
find.
could find that.
You know?
She would have loved the marketplace. Oh my
Oh
gosh.
my God. uh, the marketplace, and there's a picture of her right behind you. So that is the beginnings of a picture wall of just
Love it.
just family and people. But my mom would have absolutely been all over what your search and helping. Like,
Oh yeah.
will you
Yeah.
just let me know if I can do anything?
Yes.
I got
Yes.
nothing but time. She
Yes.
would have been so
Oh,
all
she
over
was.
that thing.
Yeah, she was the best.
That's all I could think about as you were talking about, the connections and utilizing that. I thought, oh my God, if my mom, she would have known the whole family tree
Mm-hmm.
and been able to put it together like mentally.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember? And that was what
It's,
you remember, so and so.
it's funny you say that. I can't remember where I had heard this, but they said everybody. I don't know if it was in the world or where it's connected by 7 people.
The 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon was the thing for a long
Is
time.
that what it was?
Yeah, because he was like connected by so many people.
And I believe that.
I think it's even closer.
Because I know somebody that you may know or related to this person, and Blackford County, I think we're related to everybody.
Family wreaths all over the place. You've escaped that. Congrats.
I don't know. Huntington's not that far.
But no, I think we're connected much closer than that. And I think social media has proven that to us. I'm on LinkedIn, and I utilize it a little bit more now than I have been in the past. And there's always that they're a second or third.
Oh yes.
You know what I'm talking
Yes,
about?
yes.
I really don't know what that means just yet, but I'm guessing it's a friend of a friend.
Okay.
And then maybe the third would be like a friend of a friend of a friend.
Gotcha.
Now we're talking dog relations.
Yes, yes.
Like, how do we...
Well, and it's funny,
It's only legal in Kentucky, folks.
what is that? They have the website now where and you can do the swab, and it will tell you, and it gives you your family tree. I can't think of the name of it.
23 and something.
Or
I'm gonna look it up.
Something leaf. It's because you get a leaf or the family.
That might be what. Okay, interesting. I'm gonna throw something out here to you. And it's a little bit far away from me right now. This might be information to you. I'm not sure. So, my grandpa Schick, his name was Robert Robert William Schick. My brother's name is
Yes.
Robert William Schick. Now, Bill didn't know that he was named
Named after.
after our grandpa Schick until
Okay.
years and years later. It seems like I might have known that before Bill did at times.
Interesting.
Because just my mom
Well,
would share. And
I didn't know for the longest time. I think I just recently found it out that his first name was Robert. And I'm like, huh.
oh,
I didn't
Carrie
know
will
that.
let you know. It's Robert.
Well, that's just, a wife's prerogative,
Yeah, no. So
I'm getting the look for the ones that can't see.
she has the privilege of being able to call him that. So my dad had shared with Joe and Wendy that his dad had came across the Canadian border in utero. That my great grandmother Schick was pregnant for him when she crossed the border into America.
Okay.
Great grandfather, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And she settled in Pittsburgh. I believe it was Pittsburgh. Was pregnant at the time before she met and married John Schick.
Okay.
Or Joe. I'm having a moment here trying to place it in my head.
Sure.
So my my dad had shared that with them. Well, Wendy goes on a deep dive and discovers that there is through this the same thing you're talking about. Is it Ancestry?
That's what it is.
Ancestry.com?
Yes, yeah, I think that is. And then you get through there you get like little leaves.
So I'm going to pull this over here so I can look at it because I might still be connected to it. She gave me her login information.
Ah.
This became...
I could see where you could go down a deep rabbit hole on that.
It became real
Yeah.
that I am not a Schick. That my grandpa Robert William Schick
Uh-huh.
has another father and wasn't adopted, but just kind of
Took over.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because she'd become in a relationship
Mm-hmm.
with who became my great grandfather
Mm-hmm.
Schick.
Mm-hmm.
So there's information out there, and this is verified through
Wow.
Ancestry. Gosh, this is the time when I
See,
wish
and that-
Wendy was here. But
Yeah, that stuff is so fascinating to me because I know mom and dad have books of like where people have done like the genealogy and all of that stuff, and it's just fascinating to hear all of that. But
yeah, and I remember your dad doing it years ago, and I've got it here somewhere. I've still got all that documentation. I've got it on both sides of my family. So I've got it for the Clevenger side of the family, which was my grandma Fox.
Okay.
She was Marguerite Clevenger.
Okay.
And then became Marguerite Schick when she married my grandfather.
Sure.
Never met my grandfather, my
I
grandpa
think I
Schick.
remember you saying that.
He passed away in his 40s, and I think my dad was somewhere around 18, 19. It was,
That's so young.
yeah. So, but with that being said, I'd reached out after my dad passed away, and I started just going through and kind of pouring myself into it. I'd reached out to Joe Schick Jr., which was my cousin through the Schick side of the family. His dad and my grandpa were brothers. And I reached out to him a couple years ago, not long after my dad passed. I let him know my dad passed, and found his information through his son through Facebook, and I found a picture of his son in a football uniform, and I thought, man, that guy can't be much younger than me.
Yeah.
So I reached out, found out, yep, we're related. My dad is Joe Schick. He was a teacher up in Laketon, or I can't remember the high school now. I just visited the high school recently.
So is this who your brother is named after? The connection somehow?
Joe would Joe would have a connection through Joseph Schick, so an Uncle Joe.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that would be my dad's Uncle Joe.
Okay.
But anyhow, so this all kind of came to light after my dad passed. Well, it started making me question a lot of things.
Oh,
And,
I'm sure.
just as I'm sure you just,
Yeah, so you can relate to that. And so where do I fit in? Where's,
right.
where, it's, and like I said, it's not that there's a hole or I mean, it's hard to explain.
It's really hard to explain. And, and you think about, we're talking about my mom and our, we were talking about Grandma Kingsley earlier
Yes.
and just how they were very good at keeping family secrets.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
And through this whole process of going through pictures, finding photo albums, I found a picture of my grandpa Fox, which I knew very well and loved that guy. He was amazing. But I found a picture of him with my grandpa Schick. And I had always been under the impression that my grandma Fox and my grandpa Fox met through my Aunt Betty.
Okay.
And it's possible they did,
Right.
but I find it interesting that my grandpa Fox and my grandpa Schick
Yeah.
are in a photo together as young men,
That's something.
and all this there's nothing but shade thrown at my grandpa Schick being alcoholic and not necessarily abusive but neglectful,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
Was that from your dad or was that from your grandma? Or both?
I think it was to my dad through my from my grandma.
Okay.
And I love my grandma Fox,
Well, of course, but
but I also know my grandma
yeah,
Fox,
I say
and she was
one side story.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So it's raised a lot of questions for me, and the hard part, and it's what has led to this,
Mm-hmm.
is because there's a story to tell. Your story, I didn't know your story,
Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't.
and it makes me wonder: have you shared that with Bethany?
Yeah.
All of it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I wonder.
And she's met. Now she's a little more reserved.
Sure.
Because my mom and dad, that's her grandparents, and
100%.
and I don't know, and I don't push that on her.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting you to have a relationship.
I can't imagine you pushing any of it on
No,
any of the
no.
people involved.
And I've went into it, and I've even told my biological father, and I've even told my one half brother, I will never force a relationship that you do not want.
Yeah.
I will reach out and maybe check and see how you're doing, but I will not. I guess maybe with age, I've kind of backed away from one-sided relationships. Where I don't want to be the only one reaching out. And forcing something that they don't want.
Well, yeah, you put a lot of investment into that.
So I'm not going to invest a lot of my time into somebody that's not going to return it.
Yeah.
And match that energy, I guess. Like I said, my one half brother, we get together quite often. I don't know about my other half brother. Like I said, Lenny and I have been communicating for probably about 3 years now. Where Nathan, I've only been around him maybe 2 or 3 times.
Similar in age.
Lenny and I are.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think that's probably maybe a lot of it is that we're closer in age.
Sure.
We have a lot more in common. He's got a daughter and only child, same as me. So there's a lot more connection there. Nathan, he lives in Huntington, but we've not really gotten together. And not that he doesn't want the relationship. I just haven't pushed the issue.
Well, and you have a whole life that you've lived. With no knowledge of the other person.
Exactly.
And I number one, I can't imagine that.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, finding out that, holy crap, I'm probably not genetically Scott Schick.
Right.
But I am.
You will always be Scott
I
Schick.
am.
Yes.
Right? I mean, so in some weird crisscross universe, similar but nowhere near. I mean, you're living it, and to ask someone to hey, you need to insert me into your
Right.
life.
Yeah, and you can't do that.
That's selfish.
Especially at this, I mean,
Yeah.
it's different if you would have grown up together.
Right.
Where, like with Lenny, I think we were both looking for a connection.
That's awesome.
And so, we've got that. And then, like I said, we do that. And like I said, I don't. And even my sister, I talk to her quite a bit, but she has her life down in Alabama, so she's, living her life and stuff like that. And it's, of course, I wish we were closer, lived closer together, but it's hard when you're separate like that. But yeah.
So I got to ask, are there similarities? Similar interests, looks, anything?
It's funny that
I always wonder about musical taste too. So
yeah, I really, it's funny because Lenny and I will talk about things. I said, yeah, it's probably a good thing that we didn't grow up together because they would have probably had to bail us out of jail. Because he's talked about something like, yeah, I probably would have been an instigator. I said, yeah, do it. And it probably would have been awful for him. But it's funny because when I first met Lenny, he came to my house for us to do the DNA test. And it was funny because when he left, I just knew.
yeah,
I just knew. It's like, and had I got that piece of paper back that said that he wasn't my brother, I think I probably would have been devastated because there was something about him. I don't know if it was the eyes, but I mean, there are some similar areas. But I just knew in my gut, and it was. And it's funny because what I was talking about, the ancestry thing, Bethany had started getting on that. And she had a leaf that had turned over on somebody, and the last name was Zeller. And she said, see, we would have found him eventually.
interesting.
And I thought, that is interesting.
Interesting.
Because had I not told her, she would have been wondering, why in the world is this name popping up and who is this? But since she knew the name, she knew that, hey, that is a family connection.
That's really, really cool.
Yeah. So it's pretty wild.
It's scary at the same time.
It is. It is.
It
Because, I mean, to get on those and say there's somebody that it hasn't been shared,
yeah.
that they were
Oh,
adopted,
yeah.
and I'm sure it's happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's actually a documentary on Netflix I watched that talked about it was a fertility clinic.
Oh God.
Can you imagine?
Oh my God.
I would not want to, I mean, the dating pool down in Indianapolis, that would be scary. But see, that's somebody that, there's families that didn't know,
Right.
and you get on, one of those sites and that pops up, holy moly. Yeah. It's a weird world.
Oh gosh. It's craziness.
Yes.
Thanks for coming over.
Of course. It's been fun.
It's been an emotional roller coaster over here.
Yes.
Like there's times when I've stared at the ceiling just to keep my crap
Hold
together.
it together.
Because I knew if I looked over at you,
Yeah.
you would have to stare at the ceiling, keep your
Yes.
crap together. I look over at you and you're struggling. I'm like, look away, Scott, look away. She's talking. She's talking. Keep it.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
this is good stuff. Thank you very
Definitely.
much.
Of course.
I got nothing else.
Yeah. I'm
You got
good.
anything else?
I can't think of anything.
I mean, we got a million things.
Oh yeah.
We could just talk coffee for an hour.
Oh my
Coffee
gosh.
stories.
That is another topic we need to do because there's a lot of history there.
I want to bring in more people though.
Yes.
To share the history we don't know because we're like the second set of kids. I think about my brothers and my sister.
It's kind of weird because, you have Tobey and Kathy and Ruth Ann and stuff because growing up, I think I probably used to actually call Mike Uncle Mike.
Right. I mean, for real.
I mean, because it was just that age difference, but they're actually cousins,
Right.
because.
First cousins.
Yeah. Because, they used to babysit for me.
Yep.
And so it was always kind of weird. But now, and now that we're older and we sit at coffee, and I mean, to me, we're all the same age, but we're not.
We're not.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
quite a difference between us. But yeah, it's just funny how.
It's like we're the second set.
Yeah. And I hope we never lose that connection.
Yeah.
Because, you have Aunt Carol and Uncle Bob and my mom and dad are the main ones holding it together.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. What are we gonna do?
Can't lose touch. That's just it.
Well, we'll figure it out. We'll reel the Jones boys in.
Ah, yes.
Get in here, boys.
Yes.
Come on now,
Yep. Don't be afraid.
Derek. Act like you're some big shot out there. Get in here.
Tell us your story.
I've been golfing with Jason.
Have you?
I have been about every other week. Well, a few times.
That's
There were a few
good.
times when I wasn't there that he was. I was there that he wasn't. But yeah,
Good.
so it's been fun. It's been interesting. We kind of lost touch for a while, and but we were really close when we were younger, and it's been fun. It's been
Yeah.
fun, kind of getting to know each other again.
Yeah, because I mean, you go through life, and you know each other as kids,
Yeah,
and then, like I said, we all go off and graduate high school. Because we were in school together, but
Yep.
still, even being in the same high school, we all had our own different
Right.
interests and
So
kind of went our
interesting.
different ways.
Yeah,
But then it's funny how life brings you all back together when
does.
you're supposed to be
the
together.
ties that bind.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ties that bind.
Mm-hmm.
Brought to you by Ancestry.com. They are not a sponsor, by the way. Folks, we're out.